Welcome to Positive Talk Radio. Our goal is simple: to explore evolving ideas one conversation at a time. So, stay with us as right now we present. I gotta tell you, today we're gonna have a great show for you. We were busy talking before the show began, and so much we were talking about that needed to be on the air, so we thought we'd just better get started. And Paula Conroy is with me today, and she is all the way it's 7 o'clock in the morning where she is. Can anybody guess where that is? Once she starts talking, you'll know, though. Paula, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, Kevin, it's so fantastic to be here. Thank you so much. Beautiful day here in Australia, a very far away from you in Seattle, but it's wonderful to connect with you over this distance.
Now, it's interesting because it is Thursday morning in Australia.
Yes, and I have to tell you, the future looks bright.
Good. I was going to ask you how my Wednesday night was going to go, because we're still hanging around Wednesday for a while, and but it's great fun to talk to you. And the reason that we're here is I love your website, and what you do has to do with frequency and vibration and all of the things that I like to talk about, because I think they're so genuine and so real. How did you get started doing this?
No, thank you so much. And yes, I'm fully with you on frequency being possibly the thing that I've landed on as being the foundation of pretty much every experience and feeling state that I've ever had. And I know that, the frequency that you bring in with your show, with Positive Talk Radio, even in the wording that you use around it being positive talk, that there's a spell that gets cast in that. And I think we sometimes forget to even look at the simple things like the word spelling. I mean, we say, let's spell a word, and really we're casting spells with our words. So when we use words like Positive Talk Radio, immediately there's a frequency embedded within that word, or those words that emanates out into the universe. And so for me, my journey of discovery was really all around a long career I had in corporate banking for 15 years, and just recognizing that there was a call to a different way of life. I recognized a lot of internal contraction within me as an individual. And I also noticed the contraction and the tension that was in that system, with all the people living very, very contracted lives. It was getting lots done, going faster, doing more, struggling with health, not getting to enough balance, not seeing family enough, all these different facets that were coming in that was sort of pointing towards the fact that the health of the system was not necessarily there. And I was recognizing that within my own personal experience as well, that my health was suffering as well, and my connection to my children and my health within my marriage was all suffering. And I noticed that something was really off, and that really drove me to make the changes that I did to move from that stage of life into a new stage of life that was meant to be my own. But in between those two stages, there was a journey that I went through, a rite of passage, a transition from one stage to the next, because this call from inside of me, this intuitive call, or the sense of agitation, or something inside of me was saying, this is not the life you're meant to be living. There's something else out there for you. And that's really the journey I went on, was transitioning from that stage of life into the one that I lead now, which is very much attuned to the frequency of love, the frequency of balance, the frequency of consciousness. And in that, there has been so many gifts that have been revealed, because I recognize now that everything has got to do with my own personal vibration. If I am vibrating within myself, aligned to the frequency that I trust and know to be good and healthy for myself, everything in my life seems to flourish and flower. My children, my family, my home, my work. And that's really how I founded the frequency. It's been that observation and experiential journey of transitioning from one stage of life to the next, and having a lived, embodied experience of that change within myself and feeling that for myself. So yeah, that's really how I've arrived at this place in time.
I got to tell you, there is, like, everybody that I know seems to at one point in time or another say, gosh, and I said this myself, is this all there is? There has to be more. Why am I really here? What am I destined to do? How am I destined to make the world, my family, everything work a little bit better. Do you find that most people have that thought that comes to them at one point or another?
Absolutely. And what I notice is often people are quite filled with difficult emotions such as confusion or despair or disillusionment or being a bit disenfranchised. Like they usually most people, especially the ones that I would coach and mentor through my work, when I was in my corporate career, there was this real misalignment. Like I want to be living that life, but I feel I have to be doing I have to do my life the way I'm doing it now. I don't see any other options. I don't have any other choices. I now have a mortgage. I now have children. I now have these responsibilities. I now all these things that we kind of accumulate because our culture funnels us down these particular lifestyles that land up then kind of handcuffing us to the system in a way that is misaligned to who we really are as individuals. And on a personal level, I experienced that as well, where I was very entangled in my career and in my job because of all the dependencies that I had on it, not just financial, but also emotional and identity and all these things. I was entangled in it. And we haven't necessarily been taught or learnt in our culture how to move from this state of entanglement to become disentangled and empowered in that process to make different choices for ourselves. The choice seems unavailable and unattainable. So to try and answer that question of who am I and what am I here for and what am I meant to do, there's this call, this sense of agitation, this intuition in every single one of us human beings on planet Earth, is that we have this resonance, this internal knowing that there's a different life for us or a different way of being for us. But we haven't been taught in schools or in our communities, in our culture, how to access those parts of ourselves that are attuned to that alignment, to our values and to our core and to who we are. We don't have that answer for ourselves. So in the absence of the toolkit and the teaching and the support and the community and the education to support us to discover who we are and what we were meant to do here on planet Earth, why we came here, we land up just getting stuck and feeling helpless because we don't know any other way. And that's a
I
real difficult place for people to be. Yeah.
I know, I agree, and, I really think that society would prefer us not to have those thoughts. They would prefer us to just go down the road and to have the career and to do our job and to do it well for 30 years and until they're done with us. And then we can retire and then we can go do whatever we want. But that's not why we're here. But that's counterproductive to what they want us to do. As an example, you were in the banking industry for 15 years. You became very good at what you did.
Mm.
So it became difficult to replace you.
Mm.
And so they didn't really want you to go do what you're doing because you were a real advocate for what they were doing, and you did it really well. And so then they have to go find somebody else and then replace them and all that kind of
Mm.
stuff, rather than you going and doing what you want to do, and so that you could lead your life, because we've only got a short time here. And I now that I'm a little older, I recognize how short that time is.
Mm.
And but it's important that we do what you are doing and what you've embarked to do, which
Mm.
is to work with you work with men and women,
Mm.
and you help them raise their frequency so that they can live their lives to the degree however they want to.
Mm.
Am I fair in talking that like that?
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. And I'd just like to pull on a little thread there that you popped out, which is, your comment around, you being older on the journey. And, I would like to reintroduce that word of elder, that valuation that you've alluded to, that you have over your life and of life in general, has become available to you as you've transitioned into your elderhood. Now, was that available to you when you were 15 or when you were 25 or when you were 35? It's not something that's available. And this really is a fundamental challenge, I believe, and all of us who work in the space believe or understand that healthy functioning communities absolutely require the children, the babies, the youngers, the middles, the elders, in order to function in a healthy way. Because to have the wisdom and the embodied wisdom that is available to somebody who's in the sort of, latter part of their lives, or somebody who's approaching their elderhood, is so unbelievably important to help support the young make their glorious mistakes, and to be guided on that journey, while the elders hold that safe space for them to do that, because the elders understand the value of life, whereas young people are reckless. They don't know any better. They think they'll live forever. So there's this real sense of honoring that elderhood. And all of this feeds into the frequencies of our community and of us as man or woman and everything in between. Is what is it that supports us to live from and operate from a place of deep attunement and alignment to the frequency of love and the frequency of consciousness, and all of the facets that are included in that. Love is a frequency. We all know we can't describe love. We don't have the language to describe the indescribable. We can talk about it beautifully through poetry or through song or through music or through conversations such as this. We can do our best to articulate what love is, and yet it is the indescribable. So this indescribable experience, that is something that all of us are reaching for, searching for, desiring, missing when it's taken away from us, is the frequency that that is like our home base, our home beacon. This place, the sense of coming home, is that frequency of love. And yet we have disconnected from that in the way in which our culture has evolved, and we've collectively co-created that. There's been a excuse me.
And by the way, we're talking with Paula Conroy, and if you go to our website, thefrequency.global, you can get all the information about her. You okay? Let's give her a moment or two. And the frequency.global is her website, and you can go there. It's a beautiful website, and she talks about all kinds of different things that she does. You all right?
Yeah, so sorry, got a little thing stuck in my throat there. So
that's what happens when you're human.
Yes.
And that's why that's one of the reasons why I do this show live, is because I want people to know that none of us are perfect. I make my share of mistakes here. I say probably too much. I use the wrong terminology. See, there you are. Terminology from time to time, but it's really important for people to see that we're real and we're genuine. And so you feeling better?
I'm feeling much better, thank you. And yes, thank you so much for allowing for the imperfection of life to be on the show. It's and I think for a lot of women out there, it's a real thing, is that we see and have been brought up in cultures where there are glossy everything, glossy models, perfect bodies, glossy producers, glossy TV stars. And actually, this is not the reality of life. That's a very small percentage. Life is messy, life is messy and convoluted and filled with all the things, and as it should be. This is our experience of life. So, so thank you for accommodating my humanness and the imperfection of every moment and the perfection of every moment. So, yeah.
There's imperfect perfection in everything. And that's one of the things that I've learned since I'm now a little older, and and can be an elder, is that every experience that we have is designed for our betterment. And even bad experiences is designed for our betterment, so that we can achieve and become who we choose to be and who we really want to be. And frequency is a very important part of what we do, because negative emotions, negative thoughts, negativity in general lowers your vibration, and it makes it harder for you to achieve what you really want to achieve. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the lower vibrational frequencies will absolutely bring down the energetic experience of the moment. The challenge that we have is that we are not skilled at being with the difficult emotions that are an inevitable part of our lives. We have come here to planet Earth to experience this full spectrum of human emotions, which includes the difficult feelings. And the challenge that we have is without actually experiencing or building our capacity to be with those difficult experiences in a really healthy way, to be with our difficult emotions in a really healthy way. They sit in the darkness, in the shadow. And so without us actually doing anything, they are pulling down the vibration of the moment. They're pulling down our mood. We get confused about why we're feeling so not well or depressed or anxious, or there's this underlying hum behind us or within us that's around us all the time, that is the undigested challenging emotions that we have not necessarily brought into the wholeness of our present day moment. Everybody in life has had something happen to them somewhere along the line. They've had the loss of a loved one, they've had a disappointment, they've had a big trauma or a little trauma. There's people on the spectrum of, severe trauma, and there's people on the spectrum of, major disappointment, and everything in between that. Life has happened to every one of us. Debt, divorce, death, you name it. The experiences are available to all of us. And yet, as a culture, we haven't built our tools in our communities to be able to sit and digest these experiences in a really healthy way. We just push them into the shadow. And like you alluded to earlier, we sort of, drink it away, or we pull it away, or we, the system would like for us to constantly be productive. The system would like for us to constantly be at full potency, serving the system, doing the job, carrying out the task, performing the function for the 30 years until then we get given permission to relax, And it's like, well, actually, is that really what us organic human beings are like? I mean, we are very much a part of nature, and nature in itself is cyclical. It's a circle. We go from one season to the next. We go from one day into the night and into the next day. It's a constant moving cycle. And yet the way our work operates, or our culture operates, is that it's just go, 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 more, 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 bigger, better, faster all the time. And that's not sustainable when we really tune into it as creatures of nature, which is what we are as human beings. We're not attuned or in flow with this natural cycle that should be a time to plant, a time to grow, a time to harvest, a time to let go, a time to rest and digest, a time to plant, a time to grow, a time, that cycle is mirrored to us all over the natural world. And yet our way of being in that natural world is like a square peg in a round hole. We're not operating at that level. So we have big pharma coming in with all their solutions, and that dependency that creates then on us needing to create more kind of numbing to this internal discontent, because we're not connected to that natural cycle, that natural circle that's happening for us, results in all of these difficult emotions getting pushed into the shadow. So really what we're trying to do is, in order to reach the frequency of love and live in and around that awareness and that ability to be able to tune in, and when we're tuned out, know how to tune back in again, we get given the opportunity with this kind of methodology of healthy rites of passage and practicing the alignment to the frequency of consciousness and love through things like sitting in circles and telling our stories and rebuilding community in that way. We have the opportunity to bring what is dragging that frequency down in the shadow into the light. And it gets given the opportunity to come from the darkness into the light. And we know as soon as there's light in the room, the darkness disappears. As soon as a candle is lit, the darkness disappears. When we bring the darkness to the light, or we bring the light to the darkness disappears. The issue we have is that we're pushing it further into the darkness and covering that up with our culture of drinking it away or pulling it away or whatever that might be. And so that's really it, is how do we get those frequencies that are causing us to stay rooted in this challenging part of our human experience, from the darkness into the light in a healthy way, so that we can come into a more integrated, mature experience, especially for us adults who need to be leading our children and leading the way forward.
And it's brilliantly said, because I'll tell you, one of the things that is insidious about about us as a human animal and our families and how we're raised and things is that if you get raised a certain way, you might not understand what the concept of love actually is, and to be able to achieve it and to understand it without having to re-examine, because we have people in our lives that are as an example, my grandfather was a full-blooded German guy, and the Germans are very stoic and very reserved, and I don't recall him ever in his lifetime hugging my mom, as an example. And so she didn't understand the concept of love, and but wasn't aware enough of that. And I know this is the work that you're doing, is that she wasn't aware enough of the fact that she was not experiencing love because she had never had it. She did not know what it could be. And the work that you're doing with the circle and with the other things you're doing, you're bringing people together to allow them to experience these things, some of them maybe for the first time.
Yeah, totally. And, there's a real spectrum of the way in which people react or respond to the space that gets created. So with the circling process that I do with women, as well as with the camps that I do with parents and children, so children transitioning into young adulthood, and the leadership training that I run here with Dr. Anna Rubenstein on rites of passage training, people come to the space. And what we seek to do is to create a very safe space within which people can become a little bit unsafe within themselves. Because what we lack as human beings, especially in this example that you've raised about that generational pass down of the lack of experience of love, through no fault of your mother's own, it was just the
No.
situation she was born into. And, I can mirror that with my own situation. I know my father loves me deeply. I know he loves me very much, as well as my brother and my sister. And yet he was brought up with a British general as a father, and
Oh,
a and a mother who was not brought up in that same fashion of physical attention. And my dad's deeply uncomfortable with giving us hugs, sort of pats me on the back. And for him, that capacity to soften into his body, because his nervous system has never been allowed to relax into the embrace of his own mother or into the embrace of his own father. There isn't that safety within himself to then feel like he can open up his arms and have me come into a warm embrace, because his body's not ready for it. His nervous system's not ready for it. So, I see that similar sort of thing. You're sharing your story, I'm sharing my very similar story, and all the different stories that get shared around the ways in which people were brought up by the generation before them, who were brought up by the generation before them in a very different time, very different level of consciousness. It's like, wow, look at how we're evolving through these cycles of generations moving on. We're not passing a baton from one to the next. We're evolving together in this experiential process of living through our lives with one another, moving along that cycle of life to build our capacity to be able to not perpetuate the same traumas that were potentially given to or done to the generations before us. How do we move through that awareness in that spectrum of the entire sort of, young child to elder, recognizing that each and every one of us are living through a different stage of the cycle and a different time of life. And yet our work here is to wake up to this awareness that, hey, that may have never happened to me, but that's something that I don't want to pass on to the next. I would like to not perpetuate this cycle of insecurity or closeness or vulnerability when people are wanting to love me openly. I don't know how to receive that love because that was not given to me, so I've never learned how to do that.
and it becomes very uncomfortable for people.
Yeah, very uncomfortable. So this is it. It's how do we build our capacity as individuals and learn how to build our capacity to not be uncomfortable in the radiance and magnificence of the frequency of love. When that
A-
frequency of love is so clear and pure, how is it that we can not shy away because we don't have that capacity within ourselves yet. We were never taught how to do that, and it never happened during our youth.
Let's talk about how you're helping people to do that, because the work you're doing is outstanding, and it's very unique. It's kind of very new, and but it's remarkable. I think the results that you can get from it,
Mm.
because you have people that are opening up. Well, I won't tell you. Please tell us, what is the circles, and what do you do with that, and how does it work?
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Kevin. I mean, you know, it's interesting because yes, it is new in many ways, and I'd go so far as to say it's ancient in its ways, but there's a
Yes.
reemergence in its newness. You know, so the rites of passage concept is, you know, it was coined in 1908 around this recognition that there are these key transition moments that happen for all of us at every moment of our day, of our lives. We're either transitioning out of diapers, or we're transitioning onto solid food, or we're transitioning into young adulthood, or
Or you're
you know,
transitioning back to diapers. One of the two, something like.
yeah, definitely. We're bookending our lives with diapers. You know, and we're transitioning into college, or into marriage, or into our first job, or into our first home, or into becoming a parent, or into divorce, or, you know, there's this constant transitionary state that is happening for each and every one of us all the time. So, what is it that makes these transition states healthy and positive and impactful? And when we look at the ancient wisdom that is inherent in many indigenous cultures around the world, there is a process within which these cultures create ritual and ceremony and practices within their communities to allow for these transitions to be done well. So, you transitioning into grandparenthood, for example, it's not just about your grandparenthood transition. It's about, you know, the mother of your child. It's about your child who's now becoming a parent. It's about this potential siblings becoming siblings to the new child. There's all sorts of transitions that are happening for everybody in every rite of passage. So just because one of your children is becoming a parent, it's not just their rite of passage. The whole community around them are going to be going through a transition together. And instead of being in this way in which our culture has evolved, that it's a bit separate, people feel a bit separate, but alone in their transitions, we bring back this possibility, which is mirrored to us in all of these all of these indigenous cultures, around how, as community, we recognize that an individual's transition is for the benefit of the whole, and that the whole can benefit the individual's transition. So this cohesion of community comes back in, which is very much a lost practice, a lost art in our Western culture. We've forgotten what community, strong, real, generous, binding, safe, integral community looks and feels like, because our lives have evolved in this way that have created that separation. So bringing in these different facets, yeah.
Well, no, I just have to ask you. I wanted to ask you a question because you're in Australia,
Yeah.
and we have had many movies that have talked about the Aborigine people
Mhm.
as being a spiritual, a grounded, natural type of society.
Yeah.
Is that true, or is that Hollywood?
No, absolutely. The First Nations people of Australia are an extraordinary Indigenous culture and community that has sadly been very affected by Westernization. You know, the way in which the West colonized Australia and the impact that that had on these very gentle, loving Indigenous people of Australia has been traumatic beyond belief for them. And unfortunately, there's a lot of reconciliation programs that are in place here to honor and acknowledge and bring back the sovereignty of those First Nations people of this land. But sadly, the impact has had very damaging and far-reaching consequences. And one of the most severe has been that the Indigenous people of Australia, the Aboriginal people, are actually deficient in a particular enzyme in their liver that supports the digestion and breakdown of alcohol. And with
Oh,
the advent of Westernization, there's been the introduction of alcohol into the communities here. And unfortunately, so many of the Aboriginal people have been affected by alcoholism because their bodies actually aren't designed to process and digest alcohol the way Western people generally can. So it's been a very, very difficult journey for a lot of the Indigenous people of Australia, as well as now for the individuals that are a part of the lineage that have created this problem and created the impact. So there's a lot that's happening to heal the land, and there's a lot more that needs to be done to heal the land. Yeah.
But they were at one time, before they were polluted by Western civilization and Western ways, they were an indigenous population that cared for one another. That at least that's the impression that I've been given through movies and stuff, and the American Indian, or I would call the natural born Americans that are here way back when, they had the same kind of culture that was based on, they don't own the land, they live on the land, they're in communion with the animals, they use everything and that sort of thing. And we as Western people coming from Europe kind of blew that for them.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a real connection to the land in many Indigenous cultures that we've forgotten in our Western culture. And, therein lies this reconciliation process where each of us can begin to take responsibility in whichever small way that we can, recognizing that ownership is something transient because we're all going to die, that there is a custodianship to the patch of land that we look after, and we have a responsibility in the exchange of being the custodian of that patch of land in return for the privilege of living in the place in which we live. And obviously there are places that are extraordinarily beautiful, and there are places that are not necessarily as safe and secure. So there is this mirror again of the discrepancies of the lack of communion that we have with the land that we live upon, and the honoring of the planet that we have,
And with each other.
and with each other, absolutely.
Which is why I bring up the Aborigines, because in the formation of what you're doing now, it's like you're back to the future. You're going back in time to when that was a norm of how a society operated, and now you're taking us back to a place like that where we can be together as a society and treat each other well with respect and love. And I love what you do, and so I interrupted you. I'm sorry, but it was I wanted to get that out, that this is new, but this is ancient.
Yeah,
this is how we were designed to be, I think.
Absolutely. And there's a remembrance or a resonance in each and every one of us when we come back to these processes and practices of how to build community, how to create integral circles and safe spaces within which people can, in a healthy way, digest their experiential journey of their lives, which includes those difficult emotions that, when stored in the shadow and not digested in the presence of another, become that descending frequency that we were talking about earlier. And so the work I do an online program with women around this experiential journey of a rite of passage into mature femininity. What is the mature feminine frequency, this mother frequency that us women in midlife are seeking so deeply to embody in order to hold a beautiful integral space, not just for ourselves, but for our families, for our communities, for our workplaces, and ultimately back out into the world. What is that transition that we need to go through in order to be able to move from that sense of separateness, or that sense of wounding, that sense of mistrust, that lack of safety that we feel, to really open ourselves up genuinely from our heart to another, and be in that vibration and frequency of love, which can transmute all suffering. We're going through a journey of learning how to open up our hearts again. And that comes with the difficult descent to the difficult emotions of all of those things that we haven't felt our whole lives, that we've pushed into the shadow. So it's a very beautiful held journey through the rite of passage framework of sitting in circle, telling our stories, and understanding what this descent to the difficult emotions within us, this feminine side of us with these dark seemingly, in inverted commas, dark emotions, how to bring those into wholeness by communicating with these parts of ourselves and feeling these parts of ourselves that we've numbed or pushed away or, severed off or tried to let go of, but they're still sitting there. They need to be attended to. They need to be felt. They need to be, connected to in a way that supports us to become more whole. We can't just live on this positive side of the spectrum of human emotions. We've also got this whole spectrum of human emotions, which is where our wholeness lies. The wholeness of being human includes these inevitable challenges, disappointments, death, divorce, debt, whatever might be happening for us. It includes those experiences and depression and whatever else might be going on for us. How do we bring that into wholeness, build our capacity to be with those difficult feelings, be with the original cause of the difficult feeling, learn how to relate to these parts of ourselves in a really healthy way instead of pushing them into the shadow or judging them, blaming them, shaming them, telling ourselves to feel better, numbing them out with the pills or the drinks or whatever else we do to distract ourselves from feeling. We build our capacity to feel these difficult feelings in order to recognize that actually they are not going to derail us. They are not going to, pull us into a descent that we're never going to be able to come back from. That actually by turning towards them, it is indeed our salvation. It is our solution. And that once we do willingly, eventually, once we've built the safety for ourselves to go there through the integrity of the circle and the woman that we build trust with, and that we build that safety within which we can become unsafe to feel, we bring those feelings into wholeness and we realize for ourselves that actually we are more aligned and more attuned to the essence of who we are because we've encompassed this whole spectrum of feeling.
It's interesting because what you do is when women get together in a circle, and men too, for that matter, but when people get together in a circle and they start talking from their heart and they start telling things that they may not have told anybody because it was so deep and so dark, and they hit it so effectively that it comes up just like it just naturally comes up, and then they can talk about it, and they are received with from the other members of the circle, not with judgment, but they're received with love and understanding, and that can change everything, can't it?
Absolutely. And this is the exquisite simplicity of the integrity of a circle. So when we set up a circle well, and, again, to all the listeners out there, this is an extraordinary way in which one can connect to a capacity to be in service back out into the world. We've been taught as a culture to, put our power outside of ourselves. There's other people who know better. There's a guru on the stage, or there's the wise person in the corner, or there's all these other people that know better than we do. We haven't been taught how to really deeply trust our own authentic voice, our own authentic, truthful, from the heart voice. There is so much medicine in every single one of us human beings when we speak our truth from our hearts. And so these circles, when they get set up, and again, for individuals who are curious to understand how to do that, there's lots of different ways in which one can learn how to set up and hold integral circles. And we can, I can share with you a few links for people to access in the show notes. So, what we're looking to do is build safety into the fabric of the circle. So the agreements that get made, I don't call them rules, because rules suddenly feel like we're suddenly in this environment where we've got a finger pointing at it. You better do this, you better do that. No, it's appealing to this intrinsic part of self that agrees with the co-creation of safety and confidentiality. Nothing leaves the circle. So people know that whatever they're going to share is going to be held sacred in the space that the circle is creating and providing and co-creating all the time. All the circles I sit in, there's a co-creation of the energy field that happens that is absolutely beyond comprehension, that no one single person could curate. It is a co-creation of each person telling their story from their hearts And as the circle progresses and one person speaks truly, there's this drop-in point that we all recognize when suddenly something in the circle shifts. And in that, I get goosebumps as I'm talking to you, like my skin just goes, is because in that drop-in point, suddenly permission shifts for everybody else around the circle, that they realize, oh, wow, I've got permission to actually speak exactly what's going on for me in this moment. I came, as you know, from a corporate background where, you don't bring your troubles into the room and you leave your emotions at the door, and you come in and you be super professional and you don't speak your truth. You make sure you toe the party line, especially if you're in meetings with others. It's a little bit of an internal war all the time. Make sure you're aligned to the purpose of what we're here for, even if inside something doesn't feel quite right. You don't speak about that. You just support this objective that we've all decided to come in here to do. And I remember one of my first circles, what would that be, about 7 or 8 years ago, where the facilitator of this, there were two facilitators of the circle, and it got to not the primary facilitator, but the kind of support facilitator. And she had by mistake sat on a cord that had pulled out the meditation recording from the laptop. And, the main facilitator had been like, oh, and quickly plugged it all back in again. And we all carried on. But then when it came to the circle after that, the sharing circle, she was saying, oh, I just didn't feel like enough space was made for me here. And, the cord was underneath me. And I didn't feel like that was clearly thought out by, the chief facilitator. And I'm sitting there going like, oh my gosh, like, how can she possibly be bringing all this stuff? Like, you're supposed to be holding the space. You're supposed to be X, Y, and Z. You're supposed to be perfect, And she was just speaking authentically about her experience in the moment, which was that she felt like she didn't have enough space and that she wasn't considered. And for me, that was like revelatory, to be in the company of people who were willing to speak their truth, even if in inverted commas, it wasn't a positive thing. And what I saw happen in that space was this transmutation of the other facilitator, in front of everyone, going, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't realize that that's how you felt. Here, let's rearrange this whole thing here, and let's make sure that you're going to be okay. Have you got enough space?" And she was, publicly within the circle considered. And her whole experience was transmuted in the moment, instead of her hanging on to this, but I should have had more space. And this is the magic, is that in the circle, there's no guru, there's no, chief, there's no, superior being who's got more wisdom than anybody else. Everybody is sitting at eye level from one another. Nobody's up on a stage or at the head of a table or anything like that. There's equality and inclusivity built into just the physical structure of sitting in a circle. And what happens with that is that as it goes through, this permission, this drop-in point happens where people get this experiential frequency happens, where suddenly they give themselves permission because they felt permission being granted by the collective co-creation of the circle for them to actually speak their own truth, their own authentic heart. And it's an amazing, beautiful, moving, heartwarming, transformational process that happens as each person is given permission to speak their truth and to hear themselves speak without anybody trying to rescue them, change their story, make them feel any other way that they feel. Nobody's saying, "Oh, Shane, don't worry, it will be okay. Don't worry, you'll be fine. Or let's quickly try and find the solution for what you're sharing." Nobody interrupts. People can just be with their experience and be witnessed in that, while everybody shares that common experience with them. And it's extraordinary. There's another energy that moves through those spaces that is very remarkable.
And I imagine there is at times need for tissue, because when you are saying something for the first time that you've been holding for 30, 40, or 50 years, and it is, you're looking at the faces around you, and you're being loved and accepted, tears will just come.
Yeah.
But they're good tears, not bad tears. I agree with you. I personally, I have a saying, and that is, the day of the guru is dead. Now is the day of the individual.
Yeah.
And each of us has an obligation to ourselves, not to anybody else, but to ourselves, to open our heart and to operate from there.
Yeah.
And great things will happen for us if we do that. At least that's my humble opinion. I think you
Absolutely.
agree with that, yes?
Absolutely. You know, there is this divinity within each and every one of us. We were talking about the facets of love earlier and how love is indescribable. You know, the divinity and the guru within the mystery of this life, this creation that we are all a part of. We are a sacred and important facet of this mystery, each and every single one of us. And yet we've forgotten ourselves as that sacred and important part of this whole that we all live in, this oneness of creation. So this experiential journey that we're going on, it's learning how to turn the mirror back inward and to recognize ourselves as the source of all things. We create our own lives, we create our own existences. Yes, we may have come from circumstances that we potentially we don't see as our own choosing. We might have been born into a family that our minds are saying that was not the right family for me to be in. And yet in that experience of digesting our journey, we have the opportunity to mature through that process, through that evolution, to land at a place where we can really contemplate and be with the consideration and the digestion and the integration of the experience from whence we've come, to arrive at the remembrance of who we are in this moment now, which is a unique facet of this oneness consciousness that all of us are a part of, and to remember ourselves deeply as that, to remember ourselves as that conscious facet of existence, and to then connect to that frequency within ourselves in order to be able to come back out in a interdependent, co-creative way in the world. You know, we've got an unhealthy, codependent culture. You know, we're dependent on our jobs, we're dependent on the banks, we're dependent on the farmers, we're dependent on all these things that keep pulling our life force outside of ourselves. And that doesn't support that remembrance of this authentic, sovereign human being that is within ourselves, this level of being that we have. And we're called human beings, being the frequency that lives within our own being, that we have full ability and capacity, well, continuously building capacity to cultivate that attunement to that frequency within ourselves. And as we feel those alignments, those bits and pieces of fragmented experiences and fragmented feelings that we haven't necessarily brought into wholeness yet, start to come back into alignment as we hear ourselves speak. We give ourselves permission, we create safe spaces to digest all of these experiences that are fragmented, and bit by bit they start coming back into wholeness. That alignment and attunement to that frequency within ourselves becomes visceral, it becomes experiential. We can notice that happening within ourselves, and then we start to recognize ourselves and one another in a really profound way. I mean, even in this conversation, you've shared stories that I've totally resonated with, and it turns out we've both had quite a similar experiential journey of the parenting process that has come down the line to us.
Exactly.
And in that, there's this wow, I am not alone in the world. You know, Kevin's on the other side of the world, and yet his experience of life is actually quite similar to mine. You know, and what you were saying earlier about the tears, the reluctant tears that begin to fall in the circle, you know, and very often they are reluctant tears, is that I feel in my body as a facilitator the frequency in the circle. So I'm feeling each and every person and attuning into that frequency of my own energetic state. And as it moves around the circle little bit by little bit, we go from one person to the next. And I can notice when I have contracted within myself, when someone's sharing something that they haven't quite let go of. And in my work within my own nervous system, within my own being, if I can notice that contraction within myself, take in a deep breath and relax, I notice that all the way around the circle, the person will tip into the feeling that they were not able to feel, and give permission for every single other person who was feeling that contraction with them to co-regulate in that release of the tears flowing. Everybody can let go together, and there's a complete shift of our way of being.
And you just said it. It's a complete shift. And that is what we're trying. That's what, if in order to achieve everything in our life that we want to, we have to shift away from what we've known, what our experience has told us. And one of the things I love about the circle that I was part of is that one person was saying, this happened to me, and this was that and that was negative. And somebody else said, well, did you think about this?
Mm.
And what happened because of that? And
Mm.
it came out that at the end of the day, in the 50,000-foot view, the experience was turned out to actually be a positive for
Mm.
them, for their life, and they were able to then let it go
Mm.
and feel better about it. I
Mm.
gotta tell you, Paula, I could spend days talking to you. You are remarkable, but your day's about ready to begin, and your kids are getting up out of bed, and it's almost 8 o'clock in the morning. I want you to tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, how they can work with you.
No, beautiful. Thank you, Kevin. And yeah, it's always such a treat. I love your energy. I love the work that you do. I love the messages that you bring. It's always such a wonderful experience. I leave my interactions with you with a big smile on my face. So thank you for creating that frequency within yourself for me to remember myself in that too. Yeah, so I am so my website is thefrequency.global. And on that website, you will be able to, any of the listeners would be able to book a discovery call with me. We can have just a free discovery call, and we can talk through any of the different challenges or issues that they might be facing and where they may be at in their lives, be it male or female. And I can talk through some of the offers that are available and invitations that are available for them to participate in. And all of my frequency circles are run online via Zoom. And often people are like, wow, how do you do a circle on Zoom? You'll be surprised. It actually works extraordinarily well. It's a very beautiful experience. So for those of you who would like to explore the option of a frequency circle, they are run online, so accessible to people all over the world and all over the United States. And I can also be found on LinkedIn as Paula Conroy, and on Instagram as thefrequency.global.
You are a wonderful person, and you operate with a high level of frequency, and that allows you to do the work you're doing. And I really honor you and appreciate who you are.
No, thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
And one of these days, if it wasn't for the crocodiles, the great whites, the and all them, I would go down there and see you. But of course,
Yes.
I don't think there are any great whites in the hotel, so I think I'd be okay.
I think you'd be okay. Yes, you should be okay from the great whites, but I can't guarantee that you won't see the odd snake or spider, I'm afraid.
I'm afraid that would, yep, I get it. I get it. So, Paula Conroy, thank you so much for being here. Go to thefrequency.global, find out all about her. And really, if you've never experienced a circle, you must. It can be a life-changing experience, and I mean for the better. And so, and given that, and her facilitators, they do a marvelous job of taking care of you, and making sure everybody stays on track. And it is a great way for you to get in touch with who you really are, because a lot of us have trouble with that. Again, Paula, thank you so much for being here. And if you'll wait right there, I'll be right back. Hey, thanks for enjoying this episode all the way to the end. Please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. This has been a production of PositiveTalkRadio.net. Please visit our website, oddly named PositiveTalkRadio.net, for more details about us and our mission, which is to provide great positive programming designed to inspire us all. I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm proud of these shows, and I truly hope that you'll like them and share them with friends and family. So on behalf of our entire team, remember, be kind to one another, because